He's like, trading is not about picking stocks. It's about having, right, a system of, picking entries and exits and managing risk and, so on and so forth that encompasses everything. And you should be able to list out all your processes for each single one. And I'm like, oh, right? Like, okay. So now at this point, I realize I don't have anything. And he's like, well, relax though. He's like, all that, there's a lot of knowledge there. Like, we just got to put pen to paper.
Welcome back, everybody, to Be the Trader. Today, I have a very special guest. It's someone that I constantly was seeing on stage when I was going through my trading career, going to conferences, and now I'm talking to him, virtually, face to face. So, Kunal, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know who you are, could you explain? Just start off by what got you into trading, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm almost 40 years old. So a lot of my interest started in, the first tech boom. We're starting to see one now. But in the first tech boom, which they would have called it the dot-com bubble, I had just been going to college and starting college. And it was like all the rage, like kind of like, what you're seeing now with the people that are right on the Robin Hoods, and you see really all these young guys that are really interested in trading, and they're trying stuff, and they start on Robin Hood, then they go here and they're trying everything they can, right? Because once you start, it's like, holy crap, there's some real action going on. So I'd always had a little bit of an interest in it because growing up in the 90s, that was people were just starting to really use computers. And, being in high school and stuff, you can't really do anything back then because it's high school is, it's regimented. It's okay, I have basketball practice, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. You're always doing stuff. Then when I got into college, it was you're in this dorm. I mean, college is you don't really have much to do in college. A lot of people, you have your couple classes a day or 3 classes a day, but what about the rest of the day? And so I had a computer lab right on my floor. And so I was just always sitting in there, especially I went to Michigan State. So middle of the winter in Michigan State, what are you going to do? You can't really cruise anywhere. So I would, go to the computer lab, and I'm like, oh yeah, that stock thing. It was still, people were really, really up in it. And it was towards the tail end. So it was where all the action, that parabolic final death throes was happening. I believe the market crashed in February, March of 2000. So that was my first year of college. I'm kind of coming in and finishing it up. So back then, there's no pattern day trade rule and stuff like that. And you have all this access to computers. So, I opened an account at a company called buyandhold.com. And I started like putting some money in. It was like $500 or whatever. And then I was like fiddling around with it. I had some more. And then my dad was like, that's pretty interesting. And he gave me like $1,000 to play with. And I just had like this crazy interest of it back then. So like I was always in the computer lab, like trying to look at stocks. And, back then it was a little bit different because you didn't have like blogs and social media or like even other traders to really go off of. You're like kind of on MSN Money and the Motley Fool, and like you're at like penny stock message boards and stuff like that. But the process is really similar with just what's happening now. Now instead of really shady message boards, people use Discord, right? And like same stuff. But that was where it got started. So I think it's probably the right place, right time, for somebody that's just coming into that age.
So like whenever you started dabbling around in the computer lab, were you like just exploring? Did you have kind of like a niche that you were kind of focusing on because you read some books, or like what got you into?
Yes, I read like a ton of books, but frankly, like most of the books back then were really centered around like Warren Buffett type of stuff, and there wasn't really a lot of information on technical analysis, and so I wasn't even using that back then. Like I would be like going on the MSN Money using like the stock rater system, and like, oh, this is a 9 rating, it must be good. So like in the beginning it'd be like, oh, this stock is cheap, oh, and it has a high rating, therefore I should buy it. And obviously none of those things work. But like as you're just like spending like day in and day out, like you start to like see like like on Yahoo Finance or MSN, they show you like the top gainers every day. And so you start to see like, oh man, like the things that are like actually moving are not necessarily like the cheapest ones. They're like, right, they're like these hot tech companies like Yahoo or, so on and so forth, or pets.com or whatever it might be. And so then, I'd start studying those and trying to figure out like, okay, like how the heck are these things moving? And so I started, getting a little bit of the gist of it, but that lockdown system like still just wasn't there. I had to lose my money, that time and a few more times really before I was like, wait a minute, like let me, how do you enter these things, properly? And then, that was a process of a handful of years. Frankly, I dabbled and played and went on runs and lost, throughout college. And I'd always thought like after college, I'd be a professional trader. So like I really wasn't paying much attention to college at all. And then lo and behold, like when college was done, like I didn't have any money and I had to go get a job with really none of the requisite skills that like a college grad would have. So I had to go to work. I had to go to work for a little bit. And that probably kind of put me back into like, okay, this work stinks. So then when I got back into it after like a couple years of just watching the market, but not actively being in it, being in my first career, then I was able to come in, with a lot better grounding and still had a lot of knowledge and I was reading and stuff like that.
So whenever you took that break to go, to your normal job, did you say, I'm assuming you saved up like some kind of nest egg to go back into trade?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting whatever money that you're not blowing on booze, away and you build up enough to get that going. You also don't, like when you're like 22, 23, you don't realize how much capital you need to trade. Like you're thinking like, okay, if I save $2,000, I'm back in the game, and that's not really the case. So that's where my mindset was, right? Like I just need a couple $1,000, I'm back in the game, and so you're on that hopper for a little bit too before you really get serious and you're like, man, I better come in, with some skills and some capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about that real quick before we go to the next thing. I'm curious on the capital aspect, because a lot of people do think that, right? A lot of people still think this way where they're like, I just need a couple of $1,000, I can get going. What do you mean by that when you said, I was stuck in that mindset, opposed to what?
Well, because a lot of times like you're looking at trading as just like a way to like, right, get out of whatever other shit show you're in, which is like your job or your life. And so you have like, you think like, okay, I could turn this $2,000 into something, right? And then I don't have to be involved in this thing, right? Which is like my boss or my wife or whatever's bothering me. And so you're coming in with like a different mindset than if you were coming in with the mindset that this is like your job, right? Or your business. So like if you were, like after you're a little bit more established, if you wanted to open like a bar or something or a restaurant, right? You wouldn't be doing that with $2,000, right? You would have a business plan, right? Hopefully you'd have a business plan, some plan of attack, some advantage of ways that that business will make money. Then you'll have money left over for operating in case things go bad. Because obviously, if you open a brand new business, the first few months you could be losing money, which is right, just like trading. And so you'll have like extra operating capital left over. So that's like a business mindset, right? Of like, if I'm opening this retail business or whatever it might be, this is how I would do it. And really trading is not that dissimilar beyond the fact that, of course, you're at home and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess you meant more so the fact of the mindset that you have rather than the amount of capital, right? Just coming in with the right mindset of,
you just need it, right? Like if you're going to do it for a living, like, you can build off a small account and you can slowly kind of do things and it can be done, right? But it's like you can't have it as your job if that's what you have.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
At that point, like, because everybody's got to start somewhere. So, at that point, like say you're playing around with a few $1,000s, you should be working 2 jobs and doing that, right? And while you're building your skill level, you're saying like, all right, I'm going to take the $100 from here and put it in there, right? After I prove myself that I'm not going to lose and I have like a system or a methodology that works, right? And then you kind of keep doing it. So, you you go out, do what you have to do. You go drive an Uber, right? And for a second job, take that money, put it in your trading account. Go be a bartender, take those tips, put in a trading account. So then, it's like you could still work on your game for trading during the day, but you're taking some income in at night or whatever it is that you're doing, or your office job. And, that's how you build it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you should have some money building up while you're practicing, right? While you're in that little practice mode. Now, I'm curious on when you got to the part where you were working a full-time job and you were saving, and you got back into the market after about a year of taking a break. How long did it take you personally at that time? It took, you were all of college, and then from then on till you kind of found what worked for you, and what was that for you?
So my first job was like as a door-to-door salesman. So I was actually outside. So at that point, like I'm not trading at all. And then, once I got good at that, I, ended up taking an office job, which was like still on the phone, burning the phones. I was a headhunter, like a job recruiter. And so there, like you're on the phones all day with like your headset and stuff like that. So then it was like, man, like I'm in this cubicle. I got a headset on. Like nobody's going to know if I'm staring at the market the whole day, So that's when I really was back in it, because I had all this computer time, and it was like, now it's like I can be on the computer studying the market all morning, all afternoon, and all night, And so that's where I was really getting a lot of reps. And then I was trading and getting tons of reps. I was getting much better, but I hadn't really put it all together. And that's when I ran into my mentor, Paul, and he had a Google blog spot. And it just by chance, I'm like, this Google thing is brand new then, I'm like, what is this Google thing? It's amazing. So I'm like doing all this Googling and, looking for like trending stocks, and technical analysis. And there was only a handful of them out there. There was like Brian Shannon. He had a blog, Alpha Trends blog spot. And then, my mentor, he had, his own thing, the Market Speculator blog spot. And one thing I noticed on his picture was that he was Indian. So I was like, it's like, oh man, like Paul Singh, like this guy is going to take me under his wing and make me a millionaire. I mean, this guy's Indian, So I'm like leaving comments on his blog, like every day, like, what about this? What about that? And he was really polite with his time. And then finally I just worked up the nerve after like months. And I'm like, hey, will you like teach me this stuff? And he's like, no. If you know an Indian person, any Indian person, no Indian person is ever going to do anything for free. And they're always going to say no. Like they're first going to say no, then they're going to say no again. And then they're going to let you know that they're Indian, like you don't know. And then they're going to say, well, I could if, I don't want to be greedy or anything, if you pay me, right? And so I've been bothering him, and I was like, I'll pay you whatever you want. I just want some classes and stuff like that or whatever, tutoring. And he was like, he hawed around, and then he's like, I'm like, come on, I'll be really, really, a good student. He's like, dude, I'm busy. And I'm like, come on. And so then he agreed. And so, he started tutoring me, and back then they didn't have Zoom or Skype. So we were doing the AOL Instant Messenger, and and we were like just typing away all night. Like, he'd be helping me. Like, here, this is this TC 2000 software we use right now for our charts and stuff. It used to be called Telecharts. He's like, hey, download this Telechart program, and then he's like, I'm going to show you. Like, okay, these are the scans to run, and this is like the morning process and different things. And that really kind of tightened it up because, I was still like commandoing everything. Like I show up to work, turn on my computer, right? Check, the message boards, see like what hot stocks are running around. I didn't have like that really systematic process of picking and finding stocks that fit exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to trade. I had no apparatus to nail those down beyond just searching for it, right? Which is like a lot more cumbersome. And so then he was really able to tighten up those processes because, after he asked me like, okay, what do you do? Let me see your trades, so on and so forth. I'm like, well, how do you see my trades? He's like, yeah, send me your journal. And I'm like, oh, all right. And then and he's like, and, tell me about your processes. Like, how did you find these trades? And I'm like, well, going on some blogs. This blog thing was new. So I was like, well, I'm going on some blogs, bro. 'Cause that was like the hot thing, in 2005, 2006. You told somebody you do blogs, they're like, whoa, what's this blog thing? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going on these blogs and stuff. And yours too, sir. Very good blogs.
Thanks,
and I'm like, then I just kind of do stuff. And he's like, all right. So he's like, you have a lot of knowledge about stocks. And I'm looking at your trades. And he's like, you have some inherent understanding of momentum and trends, but you don't really know how to trade. Well, I've been trading every day for years now. And he's like, no, you haven't, right? He's like, trading is not about picking stocks. It's about having, right, a system of, picking entries and exits and managing risk and, so on and so forth that encompasses everything. And you should be able to list out all your processes for each single one. And I'm like, oh, right? Like, okay. So now at this point, I realize I don't have anything. And he's like, well, relax though. He's like, all that, there's a lot of knowledge there. Like, we just got to put pen to paper. Right?
Yeah.
And take it all and put it somewhere. Let's morph this into something. What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Okay, how do we find these stocks? Okay, well, you find one. Okay, how do you enter it? Where could you enter it? Why would you enter it there? So on and so forth. And that's really, right, the methodology that is important. And so those are the things that, he really gifted upon me. And even to this day, we have vastly different trading styles, but I'm still using, a lot of the methodology, the things that, he put together with me. Because I think that's what a good teacher really does too, is they don't thrust their own particular likes on you and say, okay, this is what you trade and this is how you trade it. In the beginning, that can be a basis for what you do. But all people are different and their eyes catch different things. So what patterns make sense to him may not make sense to me, and they could make me even uncomfortable. And so therefore I'm not going to actually be good at that type of pattern, even though I have the innate knowledge and the rules for it. So a big part of coaching is figuring out what, showing them the underlying methodology of trading trends, managing risk, right? And building processes for scanning and things of that nature. But you don't want to force what you like, on somebody, because their eye may never catch that. It's the same thing, right? You have a group of, you have your buddies, right? One guy's really into voluptuous women, right? And, another guy just likes skinny minis, right? But one guy's like, how could you like that? And then, my buddy will be like, just what I like, right? It's hot to me. And I'm like, that's not hot to me, right? And that's just how it is. Some guys like butts, some guys like boobs, and so that's where the coaching really comes into play, is to figure out and decide what really that person it could be good at and what do they like, beyond just what they're interested in. Because what they're interested in is most likely in the beginning just from what they've seen other people be successful at, right? Oh, I saw this guy on Twitter make $3 million trading these low float stocks. That's what I want to do. That may be what you just saw, but it might not be exactly what you're good at. And once people find out what they're good at, they inherently will have, right, a keen interest on that. So even in my chat room, some guys like to trade $10, $20 stocks and they like to short them. And they still might be using my system and my methodology, but I never play those, And so it's just about what each person wants. And that's where Paul, really, really helped me, is figuring out what I could be good at.
I like it. So how long did it take you personally? Because I love that you've been so open and sharing, I traded for this many years, didn't really find my niche yet. Then I met Paul, traded for a while. He said, you're not really trading. So it just shows that, it takes time. Everyone's a different time frame. It's taken me a long time. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So how long did it take you to, after Paul helped you a little bit, to where you were like, all right, cool, I'm on my own. Let me just trade.
I worked with Paul intensely, on a multiple times a week basis for 3 months. And then, we did maintenance checkups, where we're still together
Yeah.
every week for minimum couple hours for like 6 more months, where I may not need that hand holding every day, where I'm like messaging him like on AOL Instant Message, like 1 in the morning, I'm like, oh my God, I got smoked out on these real estate stocks. There's a real estate bubble, right? And it's like mortgage companies are tanking, things like that. Those started to go away. And so in the beginning, it's just structure, methodology, systems, and making sure I can remember them and actually play upon them. Then after that, it's the coaching changes into more of a mentorship and a friendship of, okay, let's look at your trades. Let's talk about these as peers, right? And let's discuss like what you can do better. And so, the relationship will change, but you still, like when you're coaching somebody, you still have to keep continuous, contact with them for a period of time beyond just here's the information. Okay, you get it. See you later. That has a much lower probability of actually working.
So what do you feel like in a nutshell for you? Was there like multiple aha moments for you? And if so, which ones kind of stand out for you when you did get that mentorship?
I think the multiple, there was no like aha moment where it's like, oh, here I am, like now I'm a trader.
Yeah.
One thing that Paul really impressed upon me is like, hey, you're going to get a little bit better every day, me and you. But like when you're just getting better 1% a day, guess what? Over the course of 7 days, like you may not notice the difference. But he's like, after 60 days, you would, right? Even though it's not like, okay, one day I stink at something and the next day I'm really good at something, but all of a sudden, right, you're rounding the corner and before you know it, you are good at something, but it takes that span of months. And so there was no like, oh, wow, like I've made it kind of moment. It was always like the constant refining of processes and him pounding on me like, hey, you're getting better even if it doesn't show right now, right? You're getting better even if it doesn't show right now in your profits or how you feel. I'm looking at these things and saying, wow, there's a plan of attack on these things. There's a system. These are coherent. Okay, some worked, some didn't, just like some worked, some didn't when I didn't know anything, right?
Yeah.
It's a heads and tails game sometimes in that manner. But he goes, look, these are higher probability trades. So he goes, before what you were doing is a 50-50 shot. Now look, it's a 60-40 shot or maybe a 70-30 shot on some of these. So you still need a lot of numbers to let those numbers play out as long as you're doing them right. So guess what? You take 10 trades, you may lose on all of them, right? And you may think you're not making any progress. Well, guess what? What that tells me is if you lost on 10 trades, but you were doing it the way we talk about, there's a good shot your next 10 trades are all winners. And so that's how the numbers work out. So there was never like that aha moment where I'm like, oh, here I am. Like, I've got this. It was always like, okay, like, can I get a little bit better? And that's tough too. I mean, that's like a tough mentality to keep because obviously there's just days you just lose and you're like, just holed up in your room, like watching Netflix and eating pizza and right. Like, you're like, man, I need a cigarette and a beer. My mom won't yell at me. Right? Like,
Mom, meatloaf.
And that's tough. Like, that is really tough. But that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah. No, I like that you said that because the fact that you just put it in perspective, just trying to get a little bit better every day, trying to just be 1% a little bit better than you were yesterday. Because then over time, like you were saying, like it just slowly you were getting better and better and better. And the more that you focused on more so the process, and your mentor helped you do that because, you had weeks where you were just frustrated. And we've all had those weeks where you just feel like you can't get anything right. But if you had that mentor who is kind of talking to you and say, hey, actually you're trading really well. It's just here's some tweaks or here's some things you need to change and slowly make changes, then you could easily just give up and, completely go a different, the wrong direction if you just let that profit mindset take over rather than the process mindset. So I'm glad you shared that because you mentioned it's just not one moment. It's like tons of moments over time.
We're not immediate gratification world. And I am too. That's why I'm a day trader. Like I love going home at the end of the day, or I am at home, but I love looking at my P&L and saying like, oh, I won today. They're right back. Good job, Sparky. Right. And you lost today. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a loser. And, that's just, that is part of why we do some of this stuff, but you just always have to remember, like if you're in class and you're learning and you're trying things, you're trying new things, you're being adaptable and you're, taking progress of it all, then they will add up over time, even though it doesn't show right now. Now, I'll give you a prime example. When I started this Bulls on Wall Street, in 2008, our first year, I worked with my three best friends from childhood. We were 8 years old. And when I needed some employees at Bulls on Wall Street, like obviously I can't pay anybody. I'm like, what kind of idiot's going to rope into work for free? I call like my next door neighbor. I'm like, hey, Kevin, I got an idea, right? And so, but like our first year, we made almost no money. It was like maybe $60,000 in total revenue, which is like, covers the cost of the servers, right? And, some maintenance. So there was nothing. Now, I remember even sitting at the end of the year and I'm like, man, like I really thought we would be much farther along than now. Interesting. Because, here I'm working like 12 hours a day, making videos and content, talking with the subscribers, coaching people on Skype, doing all this stuff, putting out awesome pics in, our chat room and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, I'm just not making any traction. And I was talking to one of my business mentors that I had, that somebody had taken me under their wing. I said, man, like, I'm just not getting anywhere. It's like, man, I guess it's a lost year. And he goes, lost year? He goes, well, let's rewind the clock. You built out a whole process, a website, and a back-end system for your business that is scalable. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and you've done tremendous customer service, and you built a small but very loyal following that's with you, that will ride with you for pretty much life as long as you choose to do this. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and your trading is immensely improving day by day. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so you have gotten something. He's like, you're making the right connections, right? You're figuring out how to market, how to do sales, all this stuff. You're making all the right connections. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so this wasn't a lost year. And I'm like, I guess not, but shit, I mean, we're fucking about to go broke here on this business. Like I'm funneling money from my trading into this. And then lo and behold, like it's no joke. After he gave me that speech, it was like two weeks later, we did something. And like a couple weeks later that we had like $100,000 in 1 month in revenue. Like it's just like started to snowball, like our subscribers were telling their friends. And, I got a couple speaking gigs and, so on and so forth. And then in that 12-month period, we did like $1.5 million in revenue in the business. But we didn't actually do anything different than the year before where we made $60,000 in revenue. There was no difference, right? It was that continuous pounding, getting a little bit better, refining everything. And you think it's not showing in the results, but you are building a huge foundation to launch off of. And then when the spigots come on, it's like, whoa. And it was like, I couldn't even figure out what happened. Like, it was like all of a sudden, like, you're checking your PayPal and stuff and you're like, whoa, right? Like your business is working. And I'm like, I'm just like a genius, right? And it's like, no, like I was doing the exact same thing I was doing 3 months before. It's just when that snowball starts to roll, it really starts to roll, and your trading is like the same exact way. Like, you're going to start getting a little bit better. You're going to start to feel the market. You're going to start to build out nuances in your system of when to call audibles, right? When you could see like shifts in the market, like different things that you can't put pen to paper on sometimes. And it starts to just build. And all of a sudden, you're going to make a couple hot trades, and then the next day you might make a couple hot more. Right. And then like, okay, like now you're doing it. And then one day, you wake up and you just slaughter like 10 or 15, and you're like, holy crap. Like I just had this epic day. Like I wish it could always be like this. And it very well could, right? Because you put in all that work before that to get you to that point.
I love it, man. Thanks for sharing that story. I was like, it's just, it's a great story to hear because it's good for me to hear right now. I feel like everything is meant to be when it's meant to be kind of thing. Cause
Sure.
like I'm growing my own, like following, growing YouTube, growing podcasts, and just hearing what you have to say just really resonated with me in both my trading and in my own business. So I really appreciate you saying that. I really appreciate that very much.
Well, the big thing is always too, like, remember, like, you in this business, you don't pinch pennies or go for pennies when you're trying to make dollars. Like I have a student of mine, Alexi, one of my mentor students, and he's like, man, like he had he just started trading. So he had a rough start to the beginning of the year. I've been working with him the last 3 months. And so he lost a bunch of money. He's now made the comeback. He's like, man, I'm like $1,000 away from, being green on the year. I'm like, that's like a meaningless number. He's like, because I saw him like really grinding and like forcing things. Yep. He's like, well, I'm just so close to being green. I go, what's the green is just a color. It's like, what difference in the scheme of your life of trading, what difference does it make if this year in 2020, you finished up $1 or you finished down minus $1? Nothing, right? Right. Yep. You're pinching for pennies and going for this $1,000 that you're down when you're done and you're hitting your stride, that $1,000 is going to be 15 minutes of work, right? That $1,000 is going to be one trade. So don't think of this on that yearly basis where you're just pinching for pennies, because that's not why you do it, right? And so, but this year, Alexi, like you've built an incredible foundation. You built a ton of resilience by making this big comeback. It's already a successful year for you. Whether you get to this plus $1 or not, it's just an imaginary line in the sand, right, that we cook in. The year is a success. You've built a foundation. This time next year, right, you might make $1,000 on a trade and be like, man, I wish I would do two, right? Yeah. It's always going to be a forward thing. But this year was a success. Whether you finish up $1 or not, green is just a color.
Yep, man, I love that you said that, man. I feel like I bet you a lot of people probably tell you this, but you're very uplifting, and you're very you're very good at like putting things in a perspective way where it's not where you're looking at it from the right perspective, I guess you could say, like, hey, growth, like there's growth here. We're constantly growing. So I really appreciate you saying it, because I know there's people who are listening to this right now and they're probably hearing you say this and they're like, man, like that's me. Like I'm over here trying to push when I'm just trying to get small green on the year to show that I'm doing something, when they need to take a step back, like you said, and realize, like, man, look all this resilience you built. Look how you've come back, and look how you're just growing. Because it doesn't matter in the span of a year, like you said, 20 years, like of trading, it won't matter at all. So, Kunal, real quick, before we wrap this up, I want to ask you two things. The last thing, the first thing is, if there is like one trading book out there that you can just drop and that you feel like people would really get value on, if you like to read them, let me know real quick. I'd love to hear that.
Caveat, almost all trading books stink. They really do. I mean, I've read everyone. I still read them to this day, just out of like pure curiosity. Yeah. And a lot of people say they like remnants of Stock Operator or whatever. But if you want like more of like a nuts and bolts type of thing, and it really depends on the style of trading you want to do. But like if you're gonna like say day trade, so like I day trade momentum stocks. If you want day trade momentum stocks, Mike Belliafori, he runs like S&P Capital. They're a prop firm in New York. Awesome guy. He wrote a book called The Playbook, and it is really good. Like, I mean, frankly, I steal a lot of the stuff and use it for myself. The way like you just journal out the trades, the way you process momentum trades. He gives like nuts and bolts. Like, and it's hard to find in trading books, right? Like step-by-step kind of advice for certain things. And I thought that was just a brilliant a book for traders, because so much of trading books are very abstract, where it's like you'll glean like a nugget or two, right? So it's like, true. If you read like Market Wizards, you'll glean some information, some really cool information, but right, it's not in like a methodology or system. So it's part entertainment, and then part you hope to get some nuggets that maybe will instill in your brain, right?
Absolutely.
The playbook is very, very informative in that you can actually use the things in it if you like to day trade. So I thought that was a really, really good book. There's a book by Brian Shannon, who's really kind of like the godfather of having blogs and stuff like that. At least he was one of the first day trading blogs I'd ever seen. He writes a book called Technical Analysis in Multiple Time Frames. I actually keep it next to my toilet in my guest bathroom because it's like it comes in this nice hardcover, and it's like the holy grail of like technical analysis stuff. And that's a really, really good book for day traders. And if you want to do like more trend trading or swing trading, William O'Neill has like really, really good books on, trading trends and stuff. Like How to Make Money in Stocks is a classic book for trend traders. And even those like IBD things, so he started Investors Business Daily. Like I use and trade those type of stocks to this day. And I still use a lot of like those kind of trend trading principles that I learned in that book. I would say those three are like, they will give you some real good nuts and bolts, beyond like, what you'll see in some books.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, I appreciate you saying that. And you named out 3 good books. So I appreciate that. The only one I haven't read yet, which I need to read, is this Brian Shannon one, the technical analysis. I need to read.
Yeah, it's really good
about it. Yeah. So Kunal, what is the best place for people if they want to ask you questions, get to know you better? Like, can you tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can always hit me up on Twitter. I'm Kunal00, Kunal00. My website's bullsonwallstreet.com. We have always kind of, free and open webinars, classes every week. So you guys are more than welcome to hop in. Just let me know that you're new and say hi, and, I'll see what I can do for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kunal, for joining me today. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Take care, brother.